Hello, Social 20, and welcome back. So, last time we had a nice overview about what the pursuit of national self-interest is, and we looked at what are we going to be looking at in Unit 2. And so, to really understand the pursuit of national self-interest, we can't really do that without talking about World War I. Now, World War I is so rich in its history, and it has a lot of different facets to it. And so, it's really hard to get into it in depth, but what we are going to look at is a few of the causes today. We're going to look at some of the key battles that are related to nationalism, and then I'm going to give you some resources as well to look up some info about World War I on your own. So here's our lesson objectives for the day. And when we're talking about the causes of World War I, we can't really separate the pursuit of national self-interest apart from these causes. So to remember how to organize the causes of World War I, it fits into this nice acronym called MAIN. So every letter stands for one of the different causes. We're also going to look at, so sometimes it's called mania, and we're going to look at the A. But for the most part, we concentrate on these four causes, and we're going to look at them today in depth and relate them back to the pursuit of national self-interest in nationalism. So the first cause that we look at is called militarism. So the idea of militarism, it's a policy. It's an idea and kind of an ideology behind really building up a strong, expensive military with a lot of trained soldiers who are ready to fight. And it's really about having this sense of security for your country. A lot of nations in Europe had built them up really around the time we looked at the French Revolution, and they were kind of used almost as a weapon by the king. And then it kind of calmed down a bit. And then we see this resurgence of countries who are going to build up their military. That means training. It means their navy, if they have one. It is a lot of mandatory compulsory service that was being used by countries' leaders to try to build up as powerful of a military as possible. And what started to happen was that countries at this point, we're talking about early 1900s, they're not really in a lot of communication as we are today, right? So countries were a lot more isolated as opposed to where we are today. So a lot of countries were not really, in agreement to limiting military or any sort of kind of unspoken words to how they want to use their military. It really was just nations alone building up strong militaries, and a lot of them were using it as this this unspoken rule that should we be attacked, we're ready, and should we want to expand, well, maybe we're ready for that too. And one of the biggest races really was between Germany and Britain. Britain had access to, they're an island, so they have a lot of resources for the Navy, and Germany started to kind of build that up as well. A lot of them were using them aggressively to defend their national interests. So we saw this resurgence kind of nationalism after Napoleon had tried to conquer areas in France and surrounding areas. And so we're seeing this sense of protection, and should our national self-interest be threatened, we're ready to go. So the next one, the A stands for alliances. So what happened at this time as well is Europe was becoming a bit divided. People were making secret agreements with each other, and they weren't really informing other countries of what side they were on. But really what was happening is that agreements were being made. Should this country attack you, we will come to your defense. So you're almost kind of dragging somebody else into war and into conflict. But then there was this kind of sense of mutual beneficial, relationship between them. And so this was kind of dividing Europe. So when we went into the First World War, we have this sense of, division between these two sides. It didn't actually stay that way. For the history buffs, that Italy, kind of left and then switched sides. But we started out with a large, complex network of alliances, and we kind of group them into these two sides. So one's called the Triple Alliance, which considered German Empire, and those surrounding areas, with Austria, Hungary, and Italy. The Triple Entente, if you forget how to pronounce it, it has France in it, so it's French, was France, Russia, and Great Britain. I'm sorry, I don't know why this map does not have Great Britain, but up here, this blue island that is directly north of France is Great Britain. So those were the sides, if you will. So if one of them had attacked, if France had gone into Germany, then they were automatically going to be at war with not only France, but also Great Britain and Russia. Imperialism, of course, this is a review from grade 10, but imperialism was actually a large cause of World War I. It's because of some of the leftover, not only did it become, a contest to see who could take the most land, it also started to include a lot of resentment. And so what happened was that they would see Germany going into places and they were going to take this country and this country and this country. And then France would see that and say, no, now I want this and this. And so we saw the scramble for Africa. When these countries in Europe were going into Africa and basically just claiming them for their own, it became a race. And it really became about not only power, but it also became a signal to others. And the idea was that the countries that were being colonized were meant to be automatic allies to the countries who were colonizing them. And so if Germany took a country in Africa, they were expecting those people and those inhabitants to have resources or people that they could use if there was a conflict. And they wanted to really kind of keep their resources, and they didn't want to have anybody else. And so the race for countries, especially in Africa, were causing a lot of tensions within the countries who were the colonizers. Over here on the right, I think you would have seen this in Social 10. So this is England, and you can see he's meant to be this octopus figure who's got a hand in all these different countries. So Canada's there, Jamaica, Cyprus, Gibraltar, Malta, Egypt, India, etc. Okay, so when we look at the last cause, we talk about nationalism. We've talked about it in depth about understanding what it is. And the rise of nationalism was a fairly new concept because before that, people didn't have a strong sense of pride or loyalty to their country. It was really about a leader or a king. So when we're seeing this sense of national consciousness, it's really talking about promoting your country is the best. Everybody should be a part of you, trying to expand territories, trying to get more power and resources. And so nationalism was really kind of starting conflicts in that countries were not seeing it as a way of acceptance. They were seeing it as us versus them. And nations were always looking for ways to make themselves look better. And they weren't afraid to go into other nations to either take their resources, try to take them over so that they could have more land underneath them. And nationalism was really creating a sense of conflict because it was set up as an us versus them, I'm better than you kind of situation. When we're talking about the acronym MAIN, sometimes we add on an A, so it becomes mania, and the A stands for the assassination. So when we look at this barrel here, we've got the M-A-I-N, and then we have the A. Now, the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand is a very interesting topic in history because it is seen as really the spark that set off World War I, but we couldn't call it the cause of World War I. Okay, and that's an important distinction because what we had already in Europe at the time was what's called this powder keg. So it was already an explosive situation. It was tense, and it was tense for all of the reasons listed on this barrel here, the militarism, the alliances, the imperialism. But it was almost like it was something that was waiting to blow up. So a powder keg is full of gunpowder, and it's just like that one spark, and it's going to go. And that was the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. So Archduke Franz Ferdinand, you have to understand that at this time, Austria-Hungary was extremely powerful. And so they had a lot of satellite kind of nation states around them that they were still in charge of, they were ruling over. And so Austria-Hungary annexed Bosnia and its capital, Sarajevo. And this angered, of course, a lot of the Bosnian Serbs who were there at the time. Their loyalties were to Serbia. They did not want to be ruled by Austria-Hungary. That was not part of their... They had a rising sense of nationalism themselves. And so this also angered Serbia. So a few years later, this is Franz Ferdinand here in this carriage over here in this cartoon. He was the heir to the throne of Austria-Hungary. Okay. And so they were going to visit Sarajevo, which was not a great idea. They had a rising sense of nationalism. They did not want to have any sense of rule by Austria-Hungary. And so one of these Serbian nationalists, he was someone that believed in independence for Serbia, shot him. And so he was in the car with his wife. It was their anniversary. It was also a day of pride for them. And so this whole event, okay, so what ended up happening, Gavrilo Principe, a Serbian nationalist, he shot Franz Ferdinand in the back of a car. They had actually made 2 attempts. So he had visited earlier in the day, and there was a gunshot. And so they went around the city in a different way. And then his driver brought him back. And then this time they were able to get him. So he did die. And this started off a spark. So what starts to happen is that Austria-Hungary demands the complete capitulation of Serbia. Okay? Serbia says, no way. And Austria-Hungary then declares war on Serbia. So because of the alliances, you have to remember, okay, so Austria-Hungary has declared war on Serbia. Russia, which had seen this coming, they had their military kind of ready to go. Okay, but technically war has not been declared yet. But we do know that Germany, okay, Austria-Hungary are not on the same side as Russia. Russia is going to go and support Serbia because they wanted to support their independence from the Austria-Hungarian Empire. So Germany, who is friends with Austria-Hungary, they were very close geographically and they had the same values, then declares war on Russia. Because of the alliances then, France is allied with Russia. So Germany, knowing this, decides to hit back first, and then they invade France, going through Belgium, which at this time was neutral. The British, who have a defense agreement with Belgium, and frankly, they don't like the Germans very much, demand that the Germans get out of Belgium. The Germans don't, and then Britain declares war on Germany, and the Italians are technically allied with Germany and Austria-Hungary. And we end up with what is called this alliance, the Triple Entente. We see Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy, who's going to go to war against the Triple Entente of France, Great Britain, and Russia. And World War I has officially begun. Phew. So by the time the shot was it was not immediate. It was over, a little bit of time. But within the month, basically the entire European continent was at war. Okay. So when we look at the causes of World War I, do you need to memorize it? No, but you do need to understand the situation in Europe at the time. Understand what the main acronym stands for, what all of those different aspects are, and just understand that this assassination was really about more than somebody being shot in the back of a car. It was really about control, and they didn't want to be controlled by the Austrian-Hungarian Empire anymore. And that sparked off. That nationalist sentiment was not going to go away, and that was going to spark something that was going to start World War I. See you next time.
If you enjoyed this video, check out our website, online.plrd.ab.ca, and visit us on Facebook, Prairieland Online Academy. You can find out all that's going on with Prairieland Online Academy.